Hi everyone, this is Olivér Kovács. I hope you are doing well. This is the second lesson of my brand new series, How to Compose Music from Scratch. In this video, I'll discuss the importance of ear training and I'll demonstrate the process of creating a simple piece of music. Let's get started. If you're a musician, it's crucial to train your ears because it's much easier to compose or even play an instrument with a well-trained ear. The reason is that a musician has to identify the basic building blocks of music in order to apply them in practice. So the abilities you develop through ear training are music theory in practice. Every interval has its own unique character and mood. These moods and feelings can help you recognize them. The minor second is unstable, it creates a lot of tension and it sounds like it's alternating between two close notes, almost as if it were oscillating. The major second always generates a little tension and anticipation. It feels like it wants to go somewhere. The minor third is sad and melancholic. This is the opposite of the major third in mood. The major third is always happy and bright. The perfect fourth is stable and neutral. The diminished fifth and the augmented fourth, also called tritone, they are enharmonically equivalent, create tension and wants to be resolved to the fifth or maybe to fourth. The perfect fifth is more stable than the fourth, besides that it's majestic and bright. The minor sixth is also a little bit sad and melancholic, like the minor third, but it feels more airy and breezy. The major sixth sound happy and bright, but it's more airy than a third. The minor seventh is weird, a bit unusual, and you can memorize it as it's almost a major seventh. The major seventh is dissonant and feels like it's trying to become an octave. That's why many people remember it as the almost octave interval. The octave is the most stable and neutral interval. It consists of the same note at two different pitches. In my opinion, it's much easier to identify basic triads than intervals. This is a simple and straightforward process. The major triad is majestic and bright. The minor triad is melancholic and emotional. The diminished triad creates tension. The augmented triad is weird and unusual. The two suspended chords create a feeling of anticipation. Sometimes it's tricky to distinguish them, but in the case of the suspended second, the interval between the root and the second is smaller than between the root and the fourth. If you want to train your ears, I recommend a very useful and free website called tonedear.com. Each note in a scale has a name. It's called a scale degree. Each scale degree has its own character and mood, and if you understand how to use them effectively, you can compose much better music. But first, let's go over their names. The first note of a scale is the tonic. The second note is the supertonic. The third note is the median. The fourth note is the subdominant. The fifth note is the dominant. The sixth note is the submedian. The seventh note is the leading tone, or the subtonic, depending on whether the note is a half step or a whole step from the tonic. Now let's dive into diatonic triads. This simply means triads built from the notes of a specific scale, like C major or A minor. The first chord is made up of the first, third, and fifth notes of the scale. The second chord is made up of the second, fourth, and sixth notes, and so on. For example, in C major, the diatonic triads would be the following. So these are the basic chords in C major. As you can see, we have a combination of major, minor, and one diminished chord. The major chords will give us a bright, stable sound, while the minor chords will add a more somber, emotional tone, and the B diminished chord adds a bit of tension. We can also notate scale degrees using Roman numerals. The tonic is Roman 1, the supertonic is Roman 2, and so on. If the chord is major, we use uppercase letters. If it's minor or diminished, we use lowercase letters. Inversions can also be indicated. A common method is to use a slash followed by the bass note, in other words, the lowest note of the inversion. The main functions are the tonic, the subdominant, and the dominant chords. The tonic is always the home tone. The subdominant and the dominant both create tension, but because the dominant is further away from the tonic, it creates more tension than the subdominant. Try playing the C major, F major, and G major triads on a keyboard or piano in that order and wait for a couple of seconds. Then play C major again. You'll notice that the C major resolves the tension created by the G major chord. Now play the C major triad and then the A minor triad. A minor also feels a bit like home tone. If you want to know why, stay with me for the next lesson. Now play only the C major and the F major. The F major also wants to return to C major, but not as strongly as the G major does. Yes, it's a very basic music piece, but don't worry, we will create more complex pieces in the next episodes. Let's see the melody first. This melody is in C major, so I used only the notes of the C major scale. If you don't know what that dot next to the first note is, here's the explanation. A dot increases the duration of a note by half of its original value. This rule also applies to rests. So a dotted half note lasts as long as a half note plus a quarter note. A dotted quarter rest duration is equal to the duration of a quarter and an eighth rest combined. Another new element on the music sheet is the ledger line. When we run out of space on the staff, we use these small lines above or below it to write additional notes. In this brief music piece, I used the diatonic triads on the first, third, fourth, and fifth degrees, but in many cases not in root position. You can see the inversions of the chords in the diagram. The triad on the third degree, the E minor, adds a somber and slightly bittersweet quality to the piece, while the chord on the fourth degree, the F major, brings brightness. The fifth degree chord conveys a majestic feeling. If you are not familiar with basic triads and chord inversions, check out the first part of this series. As you can see, the inversions follow the melody closely. In most cases, I choose the inversion that was closest to the melody line. But how can we know which chord supports the melody best? The rule is, if the chord contains the note of the melody, the chord is acceptable. For example, if your melody contains G at a certain point, you can use any diatonic triads that include G. If you want to achieve a more somber and melancholic feel, use more minor chords. However, if you would like to create a bright and optimistic sound, try incorporating more major chords. For tension, use diminished chords. Sometimes the melody steps out of the notes of the chord for a brief period. This phenomenon is called nonharmonic tones, and it's absolutely fine. For example, in the third measure, the B note is not included in the F major chord, but it sounds very good. I'll discuss nonharmonic tones later in this series. All videos on this channel are free, but if you'd like to support my channel, you can do so by joining my Patreon page or even buying me a coffee. Of course, I always appreciate positive comments, likes and shares. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Thank you for your support.